The following presentation was recorded live at the Richmond Marriott in Richmond, Virginia for the 29th Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers Convention. This is tape number 13, Use of Standard Applications Book.
Monday afternoon, this is a session on use of standard applications. I am Elmer Claycomb, moderator of our illustrious panel, and Ron Counts is our other panel member here. And what you have that we've passed out, you have a couple of copies of the standard application booklets for both mainstream and plus, and you also have a Ron, is this the results of the survey that you passed out or the actual survey?
Just a copy of the survey.
Okay, copy of the survey itself that Ron distributed some months ago and has results back, and that's going to be one of the things he is talking about. In the way of kind of introductory statements, what I'd like to do is, if you look at the preamble to the Standard Applications booklet, it states as accurately as I can think of. I started to try go through and underline the parts that I thought were particularly applicable, and what I realized as I started doing that, I was underlining the whole thing because it says as clearly as possible what the intent of the document is. And it says the purpose of this document is to help callers to know beforehand that their choreography will keep the square dancing smoothly. Two of the reasons squares break down are, one, the dancers have been poorly or inadequately trained, and two, the caller's choreography is too difficult. Upgrading the teaching skills of the callers will mean that dancers will be better trained. The remedy for callers who call choreography that is overly difficult is to improve the ability of such callers to recognize before the dance the kinds of choreography their dancers will be able to dance successfully and the kinds of choreography they will not. It's not saying that this is the only material to be called, but that this is an attempt to define the most common, the highest level of success probability. As it goes on further, it expands on that. But not only when you're calling to know that there are figures that probably people will get through, but as you're teaching, these are figures that they better be able to get through when they leave, because when they walk out into the bigger world of square dancing, these are the figures they're going to encounter with the greatest frequency. And if they cannot execute this minimum level proficiently, they're going to be dead in the water. And with that as a little bit of preamble, I want to turn it over to Ron, because he's been working a whole lot on how to use the standard applications in teaching and the results of some questions he's been disseminating.
Thank you, Elmer. Andy, here's a copy of a handout you might want to take a look at. When we started kicking this idea for this panel around, probably September time frame, we didn't have a title for it, and it was selected, and we're trying to tie the thing into teaching. And I teach callers, working toward being a caller coach, and also teach new dancers, not only to the mainstream level, but we have a community dance group, and it's not too applicable to those ladies, primarily ladies in that group, but the things that I see happening are dancers having trouble executing some things if you don't feed the calls in a certain routine or sequential way. I don't really like the term sequence when I'm talking about calls coming in a certain order. Sequence has a little different meaning to me. I refer to that more as a routine, a certain number of calls in a certain order. When a caller comes in from out of town, out of the area to call for dancers, the first part of the evening is probably going to be spent trying to find out what these dancers are capable of doing. And the same thing happens when I go out of town to call to somebody, I'm wondering what I can get these dancers through effectively. So I start off with setting up formations and arrangements and using calls similar to the way they're used in the standard applications booklet, and then start to probe a little bit from there to develop a theme for a tip, or maybe work to build it from several tips, to try to get the dancers through it successfully without boring them with things that are just repetitive and things that they have danced to their local caller or to other callers. And I don't want them to go away from there saying, well, what did this guy bring that we couldn't have gotten otherwise? When you start to set up formations and arrangements for the dancers, it's very important to get them back to something that they feel comfortable with. If I'm working with something that I know is going to be a little bit get somebody out of the ordinary, I try to keep two couples so they are doing things that are familiar to them and figure that they'll bring the others along when you start to explore a little bit. And I tried something a couple of weeks ago at Pueblo. Kind of got the assignment through default because of the weather. But I got down there and started working standard type choreography. Had everybody clicking along and going pretty good. They were getting used to my voice, my type of delivery, the type of music I was using. And then about the third or the fourth tip, I said, well, it's time to start branching out a little bit. Headman, take your corner girl up to the middle and back. Now, had I said Alaman left, they'd known where to look for the corner girl, but difficulty. You got to take her by the hand and do something with her other than what is normal. Tried to have them after that, after they finally found her, square through and get back to your partner to swing or do-si-do or something. Had to back away from that one very quickly because they had not been used to working with their corner in that half-sashayed situation. When I'm teaching a group of callers, a lot of times I'll put them on the mic and just work choreography. Don't worry about resolution right now. Let's keep the dancers flowing, moving, no big pauses or anything. Try to get some smooth dancing. Very, very difficult for callers who were trying to concentrate on moving the dancers to recognize when their choreography results in a half-sashayed couple. Maybe they're looking at it, two of the couples in a square are normal, the other two are half-sashayed. You can't do some of the things that you would normally ask them to do. So how do you bring that around into situations using only the mainstream calls so that you can standard or normalize a square back to zero formations or something that the dancers have a probability of success in? If you have from a static square, heads past the ocean, extend, now you're in ocean waves with the ladies in the middle, girls on the ends. If you call a spin the top from there, pardon? No, ladies in the middle, the gents on the end. Did I say that wrong? I can tell. I've got a barometer down here. When I know I have stuck my foot in my mouth when I see her frown. Okay. But if you call a spin the top from there, the dancers seldom get a spin the top in that situation. High probability of breakdown. And if I had them in that ocean wave and had them do a hinge, I've now got boy, girl. That's an increased level of difficulty. So what can you do to normalize, to get those things into setups that will allow your dancers to succeed and allow you to work some choreography that's a little bit interesting? It's a touch-and-go type of thing for a while until they get the confidence in you to where they feel that you're going to talk them through whatever difficulty they might encounter. And if you get them into strange situations, don't leave them there more than a couple of moves. In the caller school, I had one caller that he's a brain, but he kind of likes to run like a loose gun on his choreography. Do experimental type things with the dancers, and he hasn't done all of his homework at home pushing the dials to where he remembers exactly what his choreography is going to do. And he went through a series of calls and put my corner. I was dancing in the square with a wireless mic. He put my corner right in front of me. The only problem was we were all half sashayed. And he called, and Alaman left. My partner's over here. My corner's in front of me. Her partner's behind her. It won't work that way. And this booklet, by going into it and working with it, allows me to see things like that developing and help to tell the callers, student callers, what their probability of success is going to be. You're setting yourself up to cause a problem because you're doing things this way. And then give them some choreography to let them bring it back around to something that they can work more easily with. The call, tag the line, solves a lot of those problems for us. When we have somebody have sashayed, others zero. You got to know which facing direction they're going to end up with when they finish that call, and be able to do it in a fluid way where your timing is not suffering, where the dancers are not stopping and starting and tiring themselves out. Well, I put together this survey that, let's see, did you get a copy, sir? Okay. I say it's a survey. It's basically a questionnaire. I shot it out over the internet and asked callers to respond to it. I first tried to work through the mainstream committee to find out email addresses on callers that were teaching mainstream program. And I didn't get a roster of those people. Tried the home office. They didn't have such a roster either. They sent me the mainstream committee list, but no tracking of who is teaching and who is just on the committee. The next fallback position I went after some time passed was to go into the new CALLERLAB roster and copy down everybody that had an email address and shoot an email to them, hoping that they would respond. Came up with almost 100 email addresses, and immediately when I started sending those things out in groups, got about 30 of those rejected because the addresses were no longer current. Out of the approximately 70 that went out, I got a total of 9 responses. And out of that 9, I worked up a summary on it. Five out of the 9 were from overseas. I think we have more callers here. Maybe we're busier than they are or something, but got most of the responses from overseas. Key to the questions in the survey, the first one was, do you have the booklet? No, do you teach mainstream? Yeah, I better get mine. Okay, I just gave my last copy. Do you teach mainstream? Yes. 7 out of the 9 have the booklet. Yes response were that they had it, use it as a reference. They use it as a low standard. Well, that told me that if the callers currently teaching mainstream teach that and then go beyond it, and I started to wonder why are the callers teaching beyond it, and some of the later questions approach that. I find that callers feel that their dancers aren't adequately prepared if they stop with just teaching these to the mainstream standard applications booklet standards. Of the 9 callers that responded, they had taught a combined total of 55 square dance classes, mainstream classes, in the last 5 years. Reported a total of 860 dancers starting classes, 636 completing the classes, and 495 dancing for a year, and about 394 still dancing. I was a little bit surprised at the numbers, the fall off in the numbers. Basically told me that if they got them through classes that they're going to hang in for a while. I think we lose some during class because they find out, one, that it takes longer than they thought it would when they first showed up to the first class. Sometimes we may bore the dancers. Sometimes I think classes are such that the dancers don't get enough repetition because we always put them in squares. And I've seen the result of using the Sicilian circle as a teaching device, also using a hexagon as a teaching device to throw some variety into the program that they have, still using the calls that they're capable of performing. Of the callers that use the book, they go beyond the standards. Question 6, do you go beyond it? Everybody said yes. Question 7, asking to elaborate on that. They use a combination of personal judgment and what they glean from other callers in the area from either discussion or attending other classes or other dances to kind of come up with their own version of what local club caller standards are for dancers that are just coming out of class. Question 8, in your opinion, how does the teaching to either mainstream application standard or your standards or the local caller or club standards affect retention? The callers report that dancer success has a major effect on dancer retention. If they can dance the calls from the formations and arrangements that we put them in during class, they're more likely to stay around. Integrating the different personalities of the new dancers into club life was stressed as being very important. Social activities that the club provided to bring those people in, very, very important. A couple of them said VIP treatment of the new dancers and having fun were rated very high on retention. And all callers reported teaching above the standards of the booklet. Not surprising in that we had a nice discussion this morning, and we're finding that some more changes. The book is under review right now, under revision, and we're having another meeting on that later today. Question 9. Does the mainstream application book accurately reflect dancing in your area? In some, probably overall, yes. Some go beyond it, yet others, calls that are called less frequently, you drop those calls on the dancer from a standard arrangement and formation, and they have difficulty with it. 10. Although you are a caller teacher, do you square dance regularly in your area? And by regularly, I said 1 to 2 times a month. Most callers respond to dance regularly and use this as a way to stay up on what is being danced at the local dancers. One caller does not have an opportunity to dance regularly. She happens to be the only caller in her area, and sometimes dance, the period of instruction goes beyond what we would consider a normal teaching season of 1 year, because relying upon the availability of school space to hold the classes indicated 1.5 years on one occasion. The next question, number 11, got me a real fiery response from one of the responders, and I talked to him today, and I thanked him very much for what he said. My question was, if you square dance regularly, do you make use of dance routines and patterns used by other callers in training your new dancers? And his response was something to the effect, if I didn't, I would be insulted by your question. Well, I put the question in purposely to find out if you are not going to other dances, how do you come up with the standards to go to other than using this? If you go beyond these standards, where do you come up with that mixture? Some of the callers indicated they use note services. They do a lot of outside study. And those would have both been, in my mind, legitimate answers to that. Discussions with other callers, talking within your callers association, would have been a legitimate reason. This man said that he was an excellent choreographer, and he goes to other dances, but he doesn't steal routines from the other callers coming through the area. Well, I don't know what's going on there. I know people that carry tape recorders. I get told to carry 3 by 5 cards. Jot those things down, you bet. What I try to do if I hear or happen to dance a particularly good routine, what was the formation setup that we started from? How did it end? What was the flow? What was the routine of calls that they dropped in there? How did the caller get us through those? And at the next break, I'm going to be jotting things down on 3 by 5 cards, enough to make some sense out of it when I go back home and can write it out in more detail. "13 is something I'd like to get some discussion from the floor on. If you have, we've got to get this on tape, but I ask about the standards that someone would use if they were free to design the ideal, what they consider to be the ideal mainstream class program. And I got some good comments on that, but I'd like to hear some from here. Anybody want to get on the mic? Please identify yourself, where you're from, and then go.
Gary Boole from Rochester, New York. Mine was just on teaching methods, which in our area, I'm not the only one that does it. I use pretty much basic mini squares for teaching at my teaching group, because you can do all your basic movements, other than the all 8 movements, from mini squares, putting them in mini squares, and a circle effect, where I can move them from partners, take partners away, move them to different people, and you can move your people around through the whole floor and get stronger people to dance with your ones who are not quite as confident as others, and it helps out a lot. And it takes away the part where they seek out each other all the time to dance with, and makes them learn the call, their part of the call themselves, without man always directing his wife or the wife directing the man to where he's supposed to be. It just takes that away. And that's just one thing I do.
Okay, good. Anybody else? Teaching methods, or any other of those subjects there. Sure. Please identify yourself.
John Sweeney from Pennsylvania. I do own these manuals, and I do reference them at times. I'm not teaching classes at this time. I hope to over the next 2 years to begin that process, actually, maybe this year. But one of the issues one of the problems that I have at times is that, and it's not just with mainstream and teaching, because I do advances, is that we've defined the formations, but what I need, even though I've been calling for 30 years, which would be helpful to me, is give me some examples of how we can get into these formations to do a particular call. Using your example as with the spin the top and the definition that's in the book as the formation, what calls can I use to get me into that formation to do that spin the top without violating the rules for all the other formations that I have to be considering? So if you could give me 3 examples of how to get in, I'm not saying do it here, but I'm saying in the future manuals to help us as callers out, to help us get through this teaching process and the club dance calling process.
Okay, let me see if I can get it. A booklet that would show multiple ways of setting up certain formations that could be tied back to this standard applications book. Is that basically what you're looking for?
Yes, to define an example, what calls can I use in the standard formations that would get me to that number 1 ocean wave to call the spin the top, besides swing through?
Okay.
I mean, if I was in a box of 4, I could do a touch a quarter, split circulate. I could do a touch a quarter, scoop back. Let's see, how can I do this? But to get the guys in this, I'm a little nervous right now.
Okay, if you're trying to keep it within the realm of the calls that have been taught before you get to that particular call that you're teaching, then you've got to be a bit creative on some of the things like, if you were up where you could do runs or hinges, I think they're farther down the list in the teaching order right now. That might help. when I see, well, I think back to when I was going through basic mainstream class. The caller that I started with, that was his first class, and I kept wondering why he used a different way to get us to a zero line rather than lead right circle to a line. He would do all kinds of other stuff. And what I started to come up with after pondering that a bit was that he was staying quite a bit ahead of us, and he was using us as a way, as guinea pigs, to develop what he was going to do and put some variety into his program. And some areas you'll find if you call heads lead to the right, the dancers automatically start to circle to a line. Unless you break them from that, you need to find some other way to set that up. And it wouldn't be standard the way I go about it in some cases. But I do a head ladies change, sides while the sides roll away, heads start through, pass through, do-si-do. Now you're going boy, boy, girl, girl, swing through and the boys run. Now you've got a zero line. Things of that nature. You can have dancers get into positions, in some cases, by calling what I call walking down the sidewalk talk. You slide nose to nose with this person, or you stand in front of them and so turn around and you set it up that way. And in some of our very basic first few calls on the list, we don't even give it a name until we've talked them through it with the walking down the sidewalk talk. But that might be something to be legitimate to ask to be developed. There may be some books out there that have been published by folks that will get you into that. I know Kit has books by Darrell Clendenin and Jerry Junk and maybe one other that are on teaching and on using the Sicilian circle, the mini squares that you spoke of, and you get tremendous knowledge out of that. I see some callers that will have 7 couples at class. 3 couples get to sit out while 4 get to dance at class. Outrageous. You could have all 7 couples up on the floor, and you could have 3 sets of facing couples and one couple standing waiting for somebody to appear in front of them by using the Sicilian circle method, and you could mix them. You could find a couple of weak Nellies or weak Willies in there, you move them on to somebody else, you chain them, you get them matched up with somebody else so you can keep the thing going. That might help. Do you find that Kit is in the booklet? You use it a lot. I go back to the old way of doing things. I can use that, but I don't do the study on it that you do.
Yes, we often have, it's rare that we have 2 full squares in the class. We have 7 couples, we have 6 couples, we have an odd number, and we do the Sicilian circle the way you do. And we also put them, I often put them into 2 lines of 3 couples, that is, 2 facing lines of 3 couples each. Work them. It's also another form of mini square. You can do most anything with them. It gives them a real fast review of everything. It's almost every call you can think of. And I find that after I do that and prepare them for later on more freewheeling in the class, that they're really sharp on calls. It's such a good review with a real fast review of everything that the rest of the class goes very, very well. I can teach a lot more than in one class.
For the tape, remember to give your name and where you're from.
I'm Kit Calvin from Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Thank you, Kit. Some comments on these ideas of how to get odd number of dancers into the set, and maybe make it so that you can use more of our mainstream or plus choreography. I do quite a bit of just taking part of like contras and putting it a little bit more into a modern square dancing context, and that's just facing lines. And simply say, like, once you do a past the ocean, I allow that to become one big long set. And you can do a circulate around the outside, and you can do a circulate in the inside, trying to get people to understand where circulate paths are. The huge advantage of that is I can move that weak dancer. I can look up and see, okay, there's a strong dancer they need to go to. I can move them any place I want them, let them dance for a little while, move them back, very, very smoothly, and then hoping that when they get to doing circulates, they got a little bit better chance. Because I always found that circulates one of the hardest things to get people to understand, that inside path in particular. And now that all works well if you have an even number. If you have an odd number, I many times go back to the old concept of slanch diagonal, if you understand that. That face slanch-wise, diagonally to your left. Do a right and a left through, and suck another couple in. Set that up when you first start in the evening. Every time another couple walks in, you put it on the end. You can go back to even, you can go to odd, you can go to even. You won't get people back to their partners, but I'm not trying to at that point. I'm just trying to move them around. And those are, I think, are real good things to do when every time after you have St. Patrick's Day, and I get Slants to Donegal out and work it. Why don't I do that more often? Because my wife points out, you're doing repetitious, but they don't get bored because some of the figures are a little bit different and just a good old thing to use, and it's good music, etc. I wrote down some other thoughts here while Ron was going through his, and trying to emphasize the fact that this subject of this session is related to teaching, is what we really want to hone in on. My interpretation of how to use the standard application book in teaching, and this is just mine, it's not necessarily right, it happens to be how I look at it, is that you need to know what the standards are to be sure that your dancers, when you're teaching them, get those formations and arrangements stone cold. Those are the ones that probably 90% of the time, that's what they're going to encounter. And if you think about it, if you had dancers that could do everything 90% of the time, the other 10% of the time is not going to be an unacceptable amount of fallout, if you can just get them through 90%. Number two is, I always try to expose my dancers to all the other probable formations that they're going to encounter. I don't expect them to know it when they walk out of class, but when they hit that odd formation, I hope that somewhere in the back of their mind they say, yeah, I remember that. I may have some trouble doing it, but I at least was exposed to it. I would love to teach it thoroughly. I'd a lot rather have more time to teach less material. But unfortunately, our current square dance movement doesn't very often give me that. So I've got to work within the time constraints that we have. And I also want to let those dancers know that just because it isn't standard, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just a little different. The gentleman's talking about needing something to help you get into those different formations or arrangements. My answer to that is that's what your dolls are for, working that around, because at least to me, picking something up that's written is not nearly as good as going through it and seeing it and moving them around myself and then writing that down. You know, that's how do you learn. You write things repeatedly on the blackboard, or you repeat it to yourself. Somehow you've got to do that until it means something. No.
Tom Sweeney again from Pennsylvania. I agree with your premise that the dolls are extremely important, and I wasn't trying to, in fact, to try and get an easy way out. My concern was that we have the standard formations, but what I consider the precursor call to a particular figure, as using the example, I mean, what else do we call besides swing through and then spin the top? What do we call before spin the top? 99% of the time we call swing through. Well, there must be some other combination of calls that we can get those dancers into that formation to get them to be able to do something other than swing through. Now, if I come up with something other than swing through, nobody else in this room knows that. So from a success point of view, it would be nice if we could all come up with even some precursor calls that were a little bit standard.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is, again, unfortunately, we have calls like spin the top that it's not only the formation, but it's almost, it has to follow. And that just irritates the dickens out of me, but that happens to be what it is. Make it simple, pass through, do a U-turn back, do a do-sa-do, step to an ocean wave, spin the top. You know, just get them into a half sachet and then do a do-sa-do to a wave. You still may have some difficulty because they're still thinking, I've got to have the boys on the end. They can't possibly be in the center of an ocean wave after a do-sa-do. That's probably the next simplest way to get people into that. But that... yeah, I can see the point you have just to help a person think about things that are a little bit different ways to get there. And but I have written down really that the ability to move people into not only the standard formations but the other ones, so that you can teach people in those a little bit different arrangements that you want
you've got to know how to get them there, and with some variation. When you talk about the new caller who is working with your class, that's probably as good a way to get a class, because he was making himself learn that stuff and then taking you through it. I think one of the things that our classes are missing are those young, aspiring callers who are, man, they're just learning all this stuff. They got one square, and they're going to emphasize everything on that square, and they were perfectly happy to have one square, and they were learning to call. At least I was. It's so long ago I don't remember what it was like anymore. Okay, another thing I think is really necessary is to have singing calls that utilize those applications, because the beauty of singing call is the repetition is there, but in such a way that it doesn't seem like repetition, because particularly for the new dancer, every time they change their partner, that's a crisis in itself, and then you put the figure with it, and I think in teaching we need to go back to the old method of singing calls where you repeat the figure time after time. And I even have trouble doing that because I'm so used to mixing all my singing call figures that to repeat that thing kind of grits on me, but that's what the class needs. Another thing that's not directly related to standard applications, and yet it is, and that is to have a list where you really check off what you've done. And that list needs to have more than simply, I did that figure. It's like you've got to think, I did that figure, and also in the appropriate, at least standard applications, and then what extension of that should I have done. And last thing I've started doing, and I dearly love it myself, I've got a headset. The reason I got it is when I hold a microphone in my right arm too much, and I think particularly when you run your record reset, and when you're teaching, you hold that reset in. Well, that takes a muscle, tightens it up, and I get the equivalent of carpal tunnel syndrome or some such thing. So I got a headset. Now what happens, whenever there's short a man out on the floor, I go out and dance. And, geez, get out there, feel what the people are going through, teach them how to swing. Tremendous teaching tool that we didn't have available to us very long ago. We didn't have headsets so you could get out on the floor and dance with your people. Last two comments. When you go into an outside area, how to dance. You pretty quickly learn what the teachers have been teaching and emphasizing, and or what the regular local callers have been using. And Ron was talking about, hey, take a corner girl up the middle and back, and very simple in itself, but if people haven't been exposed to it, that's just enough as a reverse half sachet watch-a-majigger that they've never heard before, because it's just, they haven't done it. The last thing is, I think for the caller that's using written material, modules, anything other than sight calling, knowing the standard applications, formations, and arrangements is even more important, because if you're sitting there and writing down that material or memorizing that material, you better know that you're in the formations that you expect to be and whether people are going to get through it. To me, when I learned sight call, it's like calling just became a whole new world, because I started out, everything was memory, just that's the only way anybody called. Well, now I can watch the floor, and I can see what it's doing. I can see it stumble the floor right in my material a lot of times. And I get done doing something that worked real well, and I'll be darned if I can remember what it is. I'd like to write it down and use it again. It's gone, because the people made it up. I just got to moving into it well. And if something's not working well, it's no problem for me to pull it out of my repertoire now and, bypass and work into it. But I remember when I used to have that material down with notes as to what I was going to do. Oh, this was a sequence that I had memorized, and they couldn't do. Well, that's just throw out that evening and we go on to something else. Okay, I'm done. You guys got to have some more questions.
Got one back here. How's that? Gary Bouvard again, Rochester, New York. I'm just going down through your list here of things. I come to clubs in the area. Rather than doing a number of classes, I do one class. First off, I join them together. They do all the clubs. Have that people come to one class. I localize it between them, so it's not a long run for anybody. And in doing that, I really took responsibility of the whole thing, and just saying that I'm going to run it, and it goes from there. And what the club's part was to provide me angels, but angels at my request to how I wanted them to come. And at the very beginning, I have some angels that come in. They don't dance unless I need them. They don't participate unless I need them. If there's a husband or a wife missing in the evening. And before they come in, we have a talk about what their part is as an angel. A lot of gentlemen, especially, like to direct ladies exactly where they're supposed to be. You know, I said, you're not there to do the thinking for them. You're there to be the steady hand that reaches out and says, yes, I'm supposed to come to you. And I don't let any of us dance with the club for quite a while, for at least 10 weeks until after Christmas. For some fact, they're going to break down and they're going to have their problems, but I'd rather they solve their own problems and do their own thinking. Because there's certain people that break down all the time, in certain movements, they'll know if that angel is acting and thinking for them and making them think straight. And after they've danced until about February, then I start having the angels come in, and I started calling more into a club level type of dancing with using all the movements. And then the angels dance with them, but again, they're not going to direct them, they're to be there to practice with them. And that's, that's just something I do with them. And, the angels have gotten very good at responding to that. That they don't do the dancing for the dancing. I can learn.
Good, thank you. I'll run over some of the responses I got for those things. Under the standards, unanimously teach to the correct definition and styling standards. You color knowledge and judgment along with that. And I would modify that comment just a little bit. Styling needs to be taught with the definition of the move. If you try to bring styling in later, number one, they've already formed bad habits, which are tolerate, and you're extending each time. If you put it together either through a demonstration, the use of angels, or one of the guys I got, and this is something that I thought, well, gee, these people are really innovative. They said we use computer animation to show the flow of the moves, and there are at least 2 websites, probably more, that you can go onto and click, and it activates little checkered answers, and you can watch how that thing goes. The people that maintain those websites have a dialogue written out that you can download, and it shows how they present it and where all the choke points are in taking that move. Timing, the time for the class. I got one said 35 evenings of 2 hours each. Others said 2 to 3 times a week, 1 hour per call, and another one said 1 hour per call plus an additional 1 hour for every 5 calls, spreading it over 28 to 30 weeks. Under references, had comments, the CALLERLAB styling definitions booklet, the styling booklet, personal library, didn't elaborate upon, discussions with other callers, and experimentation. Teaching method, where explain the call and traffic pattern, demonstrate the call, practice, practice, practice. Correct mistakes immediately, and I think that is critically important. I hear people say that practice makes perfect, but only perfect practice makes perfect. You let somebody dance a mistake, they're just reinforcing a problem, and it's going to take a long time to break. One caller responded, this is not European callers, he said he questions the dancers about definitions after they've had them for a while. Quiz time, look at so-and-so and ask a question about it. That's mildly dangerous, in my opinion. So I didn't come here to take a test, I came to dance. Another one, and I want to follow up on it later, he said that that each dancer that comes in gets a booklet telling them what to expect over the course of the instruction. Recruiting methods were word of mouth, bring fans, active recruiting, using flyers, newspaper, and one caller said they're still working trying to figure that one out. I think all probably are, but we're ashamed to admit it. Retention methods, dancer enjoyment results, dancer retention. Keep it fun. Progression, social activities, guys on the club night night. I don't know about Elmer, but when I went through classes, it didn't matter what night the class night was on, what night the club danced. Things were not quite so busy 5 years ago. Right now, our dancers, or potential dancers, only have one night perhaps available to do something, and we have lost dancers simply by switching dance location and club dance night. They've got other plans for the weekend. We were dancing on Friday nights, switched to Saturday, moved across town. Those dances that were available on Friday night are no longer available to dance on Saturday night.
This is the front side of your cassette.
Where else, and we've lost them. They're still dancing, but not with our group. Another said, get the new dancers involved from the beginning. Treat them as VIPs. They are members of the club from the first night. And then I got a comment, fun, dancer success, variety, challenge, social activities are equally as important as dancing success. Under assistance from clubs and angels, one caller said he briefs the angels separately and then briefs them in the presence of the new dancers on several occasions. That is mildly dangerous. Sometimes angels are anxious to become a teacher also. Only they teach, I find most of them teach the bad habits, the things that you don't want your dancers to learn right away. And sometimes they want to talk while the teacher is talking. Okay. Kit, let me come back to you. You had an example of one that just could not keep his mouth closed at the proper time. What did you do?
I brought a roll of duct tape, and I threatened him with it. It worked with a person who was a lesser friend than he is. It might have offended him, but in this case I won the battle.
Some years ago, I actually called in Colorado Springs, where Ron is from, for a number of years before we moved to Arizona. And I was doing a class with the, let's see, what's the Sunday night singles club there? Spring Singles. And out on the floor, suddenly this one gal says to another one, if you would shut up and listen, you could learn. And I thought, oh my life, the floor is going to just, they're going to be at each other's throats. And the one that had been yelled at, she just kind of grinned and stopped talking for 30 seconds maybe. Turns out they're sisters.
Well, so far we haven't had to check our metal objects at the door. So, some callers said angels are essential. Others said angels are only essential to fill the last square. Dance by definition and teach styling when a call is taught. Have the angels help the slow learners and those with slow reaction time. Now, there's a difference between being a slow learner and having a slow reaction time. I know of one fella who, if you ask him how to do a call, he can tell you. But he cannot move his feet fast enough to get to the next position. Angels can speed up the learning process, but they can also create problems if not disciplined properly. Under Caller Club Liaison, fixed relationships, a caller is a co-founder and member of the club. That's a great situation. Caller run class is the most successful. Several people said that, right along with what you commented upon there. An employee of the club is the least desirable situation for a caller to be in. And I got that loud and clear. Probably the most important request I had on there was the very last thing, merging new dancers into the local clubs. And I'm going to change some things my next time around, and largely from ideas I picked up in here. The new dancers are encouraged to visit other clubs to find out what it's like out, what they like and what they don't want. This person's very brave, but he's had good success. He said 95% of them come back to the club where they went through the class situation. Most club presidents, most callers would be afraid to let their dancers go somewhere else. And I know of at least one caller. He's not calling anymore, but if he found out that any of his dancers had been visiting somewhere, he upbraided them in public. And I don't know anybody that would tolerate that nowadays. New dancers should be members of the club from the start. Dance the new people with the club as soon as possible. Try to have the club and the class on the same evening. One caller said from about call number 55, they start blending the class into the club. Another said start integrating at about Christmas. One other responded, new dancers are club members from day one and have all the privileges of the club members. Using a class coordinator is an effective way of bridging a gap between the caller and the dancers, particularly if the caller doesn't have a partner or if the partner is extremely busy. We use a class coordinator, I think, very effectively in that the dance class is on Friday night. Wednesday, that person sends an email to everyone that has an email address, telling them something that's exciting that's going to happen at the class, and they try to put it in kind of an exciting or comical vein. And for those few new people who do not have email addresses, then it's a telephone call. Years ago, I thought that was absolutely ridiculous, that if you went to the first class and you liked what you saw, and you knew the class was going to be on Thursday or Friday or whenever, it's your responsibility to be there every night, and you don't need any kind of a reminder. But it is necessary now. One of the things that we have used also, there are no students. Never refer to anybody as a student. All of them are new dancers from the first night, and they're square dancers after they dance the first tip, after they first start dancing. We do not refer to the dance sessions as classes. It's a new dancer dance or a new dancer session. That seems to take some of the, oh, I'm going to school out of it. Going back to one of the things that came up while Elmer was talking, the fact that you have a wireless mic and can get into the square and dance. If you want to improve your calling and your teaching, dance to yourself. If you can't do that, tape yourself. And things fall out of my mouth that I don't hear the way they go out sometimes. Just had an example a while ago when I was setting up that ocean wave. Put that together wrong. And if you're using somebody else's material and you're not citing it, if you get one call out of sequence, it can mean disaster. Down in the community dance session the other night, they were running out of people to do something, and what I do is probably not in the vein of what they were working on right then, but I got up 6 couples and started working them, and I sight call. And we had a couple of interruptions, had to replace some people because we had non-dancers that were up there, and the routines that I was working with, they were having difficulty. And I did I had them in 0 lines, right and left through, and then a pass through, and I did a U-turn back instead of a partner trade, and I called touch a quarter column circulate, boys run, Alaman left. She told me about it later. I heard about it. In my mind, I had done the partner trade, but in reality, I had not. Those are the type of things that can happen to you. When you're calling, you can have a very momentary distraction. Drop a call, and you get yourself in trouble. I find that using hexagons is a way to throw a lot of variety to the dancers and give them, they get the feeling quickly that I can do something the majority of the dancers around this area cannot do because they aren't used that much. And you can use them very effectively, sight calling with mainstream calls, basic calls, and zero them out. You can use them for singing calls. All you got to do is partner change. If you're doing that, go through it 6 times, save that one. I usually use the first one through just to kind of gentle them down and everything, and then 6 times corner progression. Comment. Okay, the hexagon is not a true hexagon. It's not the 6-sided thing. I have 2 sets of side couple, a side couple, a side couple, 2 pairs of head couples facing each other. Most of the activity involves the head couples, but you can get the side couples involved. There's a book down in the sales area that I can't remember the
The one that at least I know of is Gene Trimmer's Crowd Pleasers, that has hexagon squares, and I think he uses them the same way you're describing. You have two couples on each head and one in each side. And incidentally, on those hexagons, plus must have been written for hexagon squares. What you can do with plus and hexagons is just, man, it is neat. Mainstream, you can use it, but it's not until you get into the plus figures and start playing with them and think, just, man, you can do a lot of stuff with plus.
Other variations that you can do depending on how many squares you have or how many dancers you have, you can just change a formation or change an arrangement and give the dancers variety with the calls that they're able to use. And it's only limited by your imagination. Does anybody else have any comments on use of anything or any methods you've used to recruit dancers? Yes?
Yes, John Sweeney, the hexagonals, I agree with you. They're a tremendous tool, particularly if you, like you said before, if you've got only 7 couples and you want to get all 6 involved, 6 of those 7, that's tremendous. We've done that with classes in the last few years. For those of you who haven't used them, I've found that all my standard zeros and all my standard line-to-box and box-to-line conversions work without alteration. That may not be true, but all the ones I have work.
Okay, one of the things that we use to kind of pull the dancers into the club and make them welcome is trips. Something that we can do as a social occasion that will tie square dancing into it. And starting about 2 years ago, we came up with the idea of we're going to dance Colorado. The first trip we did, living right at the base of Pikes Peak, we went up on the mountain and danced on top of the mountain. Yeah, I danced to Elmer there once. He's got something to say.
I was going to ask you, did the records keep blowing off the turntable when you were trying to call?
They do. They do. And if you want a thrill, be dancing and look down and see some clouds floating by or a light airplane flying down below you. 14,110 feet. That was not quite good enough. The group had so much fun they wanted to go somewhere else, and I had worked over in the southwest part of the state quite a bit and had spent a lot of nights in and around Durango, Cortez, Colorado. And Kit Galvin's 2 sons had gone to college at Fort Lewis in Durango, and she knew something about that area also. So we put together a trip with the idea of dancing in 4 states at one time. We coordinated this thing, picked a motel that we knew would be good and everything, and found out, well, we detoured by there on the way to the Las Vegas CALLERLAB convention and visited the Four Corners Monument. No electricity, no water, pit toilets, and a lot of sunshine and heat. We went, we took, I think, about 20 dancers with us. We convoyed over in cars and used family radios to communicate on the way. We stopped for breakfast in Monte Vista, Colorado, which is about 185 miles away. We got in there at about 3:30, I think, in the afternoon, checked into the motels, and then we had another 45 miles to drive to the actual monument from Durango. We got out there, and we had gotten permission from the Navajo Nation that runs the Four Corners Monument area, and they didn't want us to be on the monument dancing when people wanted to be out there doing their thing with one hand in one state, one in another, 1 foot in 1 foot, and looking up at somebody like a cockroach where they took their picture. We decided we were going to dance one time through the record on there. Got the square out, started calling. Power was provided from a car, cigarette lighter run through an inverter into the PA set. Quiet enough to do it and everything. Our dancers became amateur photographers for the couples that showed up and they wanted a picture of the 2 of them or the 3 or whatever in that family group. Everybody wanted to be in the picture. Our guys would take the camera, shoot the pictures between tips, and then back to dancing again. And we got a lot of good PR there. We came back into town that night went to a restaurant frequented by the college crowd, and were lucky enough to get tables together. Had a good time there, and then people went on their separate ways on Sunday to come back home as they wanted to over that weekend. Since then, we have danced on the Great Sand Dunes Monument with better than 20 dancers. We had to wade a creek that was about 50 yards wide to get there. It was narrow enough to step across when we did the recon on it. We danced on the dunes, came back down, picnicked, and then went to a place called the Colorado Alligator Farm. The Alligator Farm has a gazebo-type situation that would dance 2 squares built out over the slough in which the gators live. So we put the squares together and danced there, and then the owner's son came up with a 6-foot alligator and put it in the middle of the square, and we danced around it for a while. We called it the Gator Grunt, got pictures and everything like that. Our second trip back there is going to occur in May this year. Things that bind the dancers to you in a social situation where you can include a little bit of dancing in with it goes a long way. They identify, getting the signal. Dangles, oh yeah, our guys invented or designed the dangles for each of those things. A gator, a cloud hopper for the top of the peak, and a thing with the cross in it for the Four Corners Monument. But things of that nature, if you can come up with something like that, will tie your dancers to you. It's a fun group, and you'll pick up dancers from other clubs as well. Those are some of the ways that will make this thing work, but the dancing, the teaching, the social activities are all critically important.
We're getting a little bit closer to the end of our session now. If anybody has any more comments, please feel free to add them in. Well, another thing I was thinking about, I've got a new challenge coming up right now, or I'm working on it, and that is that the Prescott, Arizona Club has gone to the multi-cycle this year. And since we're in a relatively small area where we don't have other clubs right in town, it's really putting a bind on us in terms of dance nights, putting a bind on me because of not having more nights than I'm willing to commit to it. And I'm having to look at even more critically at what I'm teaching, how fast I'm teaching, and how well does the idea that the people that went through the first session now become the angels for the second session. And it's not as an angel, but rather as just part of their ongoing teaching program. And I think all of us that are getting into the multi-cycle, as everybody else has said, it seems to have given us new vitality and a lot more people coming into the class. But now I've got the real struggle with the club wanting to have more dancing at their level, and yet we're still trying to run 2 classes, etc. Probably the real careful analysis of how much I can teach at what time and how it's going to affect the overall end product is going to add more to the teaching responsibility than even we had before. Anything else? We'd like to thank you for coming and participating today. Go away and tell everybody what a wonderful session this was and that they should have all come and joined in.